Take her rifle, now, no questions. The order cracked through the desert heat like a whip. Moments later, 5 elite soldiers circled her, confident, brutal, ready to humiliate her in front of the entire camp. But they hadn't just stripped a recruit. They disarmed something the system was never trained to see. 83 seconds later, 5 elite soldiers lay broken in the dust. Not from rage, not from defiance, from precision, from experience buried under redacted files and forgotten scars. She didn't fight to prove herself. She fought to show them what they missed. Her name was Sierra Vale, and after that day, no one ever mistook her for a trainee again. The convoy rolled to a halt in the middle of nowhere. Southgate, Sector 9. Dust settled on the windshield like a warning. Inside the lead transport, 17 candidates sat stiff, sweat already clinging to their skin as desert heat clawed through the steel frame. Most wore the same look. Focused eyes, clenched jaws, adrenaline masking fatigue. But one didn't. She sat in the second row from the back, perfectly still, like she was waiting for something to start that had already ended in her mind. No insignia, civilian boots, a neutral gray shirt. Not regulation issue. Sergeant Lucas Hart leaned over the railing of the elevated platform, overlooking the arrival zone. He scanned the group like a hawk circling prey, and paused. His eyes locked onto the woman the others didn't even seem to notice. "That's not a rookie," he muttered under his breath. "That's someone who already knows the layout." There was something unnerving about the way she walked. Not arrogant, not scared. She moved like a shadow through sun, certain, calibrated, minimal motion wasted, as if she'd measured the steps before she took them. Her name tag read, Vale Sierra. Her file, clean, too few deployments, no injuries, no citations, no awards. Not even a disciplinary note or typo in the intake form. It wasn't just strange, it was scrubbed. Commander Eliza Monroe stood at the back of the observation room, flipping through Sierra's personnel file again. 7 pages, half of them admin duplicates, the rest smoke. But on page 6, buried in a clearance note at the bottom, one phrase chilled her. Echo Black, archived. Eliza had seen Echo Black before, once, during a war games scenario classified above even her current level, but she had never seen it marked archived. That designation was usually reserved for dead operatives or those who vanished off-grid. And now one of them was walking into her camp with civilian boots and no expression. On the training field, Sierra stepped into line with the other candidates. Private Leah Morgan, standing 2 spots to her right, immediately noticed something felt off. Leah had grown up in silence, third of 7 kids. You learn to observe when no one waited for you to speak. And Sierra, she didn't breathe like the others. She didn't check her 6. She didn't fiddle with her shirt or shift her weight from boot to boot like the rest of the recruits trying to hide nerves. "She's not new," Leah whispered to herself. "She's just quiet." The first drill came fast. The instructors barked out the assignment. XM9, adaptive rifle. Field strip, clean, reassemble. You've got 15 minutes. Fail, and you don't touch a live weapon again. Most candidates jumped into action, fumbling, muttering. Tools clattered. One guy already nicked his thumb. Sierra? She approached the rifle like it was foreign. She hesitated, fingers slow, eyes scanning like a novice. But Leah kept watching and saw it. Her hesitation was staged. The pauses weren't indecision, they were timed. Her grip, perfect. Her pressure on the release plate, featherlight. Her motions, clean, precise, repeatable. Like muscle memory she was pretending to fight against. "She's faking it," Leah whispered again. "She's hiding. But from who?" Sierra completed the drill in 6 minutes, 12 seconds. But not a bead of sweat showed, no grin, no relief. She placed the weapon down, stood back, and locked her hands behind her back like nothing had happened. Back in the command tent, Sergeant Hart slammed the file closed. "Either she's the biggest fluke we've ever processed, or someone wants her to look like one." He looked at Monroe. "What the hell is Echo Black?" Monroe didn't answer, not out loud. Her eyes stayed locked on the window as she watched Sierra move across the yard. Alone, unreadable, almost practiced. She didn't walk like someone adjusting to Camp Southgate. She walked like someone who had trained here before. long ago, and knew exactly which blind spots the cameras had. It wasn't just mystery, it was threat. But the strangest part? Sierra didn't act like she wanted to fight. She acted like she was waiting for them to notice she could. Every morning the drills began before the sun rose, and every morning Sergeant Lucas Hart was waiting for her. He didn't yell at Sierra Vale. He didn't need to. Instead, he operated with sarcasm, measured cruelty, and surgical pressure. Extra weight in her rucksack, extra reps in the heat. Her name called for every correction, every equipment malfunction, every inspection fail, even when she'd pass clean. Miss Vale, you walk like a librarian and shoot like a civilian. This is Camp Southgate, not community college. The others laughed at first. Vale never flinched, never cracked. She simply nodded and moved. No anger, no retreat, just movement. Leah Morgan watched from the sidelines unsettled. It wasn't just that Sierra didn't break. It was the way she didn't break. Like she'd been broken long ago, rebuilt for silence, and now lived in a quiet pact with pain. You don't touch me, I won't acknowledge you. Leah had seen confidence. She had seen fear. This was different. The real shift came on day 9. Shooting range evaluation. All candidates were required to complete the XM9 adaptive rifle drill. 5 rounds, 5 targets. Standard qualification. A basic test to separate weekend shooters from real marksmen. Hart stood behind Sierra with arms folded and a smirk designed to provoke. Let's see what you've got, librarian. She stepped forward, calm, neutral stance, breathing slow. The other recruits were jerking triggers and inhaling nerves. Sierra stood like a shadow. She raised the rifle and fired. 5 shots, evenly spaced. No showmanship, no flair, just done. Crack, 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 crack. Hart walked forward first, already drafting another insult in his mind. But then he stopped mid-step. The paper target floated back from the pulley system, moving slow in the wind. 5 rounds. 1 hole. Dead center. A ragged, perfect tear, like a surgical scalpel, had passed through. Master Gunner Cole Ramirez, a legend on the base who rarely left the advanced training annex, was observing from the tower. He didn't speak as he looked through his binoculars, but he turned pale. Ramirez had only seen groupings like that 3 times in his entire career, and every time, the shooter's file was eventually redacted into oblivion. Sierra lowered her rifle with no expression. She didn't wait for applause, she didn't check her work. She simply turned, rejoined the line, and waited for Hart's denial. He didn't disappoint. 1 hole doesn't mean much. Could have been luck, or a misfire. Groupings overrated anyway. Leah could hear the hesitation in his voice. It wasn't conviction, it was desperation. He had nothing left to say that made sense. Later that day, while the others rested, Hart assigned Sierra a corrective task, reorganizing the armory lockers by serial code, solo, with no gloves, under full inspection lights. When Leah passed by hours later, Sierra was still at it. Her hands raw, eyes focused, mouth silent. She's not proving herself, Leah whispered. She's hiding something, but not because she's afraid. Day after day, the pattern repeated. And when Hart mocked, Vale absorbed. No reaction. No rebellion. Just precision. She completed every drill with robotic consistency. She ran exactly 7 minutes, 45 seconds per mile every day. Never more, never less. It wasn't a pace, it was calibration. Leah started timing her deliberately. Vale's hands moved like they were remembering, not learning. When Leah asked her one night how she'd learned to clean an XM9 blindfolded, Sierra just looked up and said, "You don't forget the tools that kept you alive." Nothing else. No details, no story. Then came the hand-to-hand session, and things got stranger. Hart paired Sierra with Delaney, a 6'2" former college wrestler built like a concrete truck. Sierra looked hesitant at first, timid even. Hart barked, "Don't think, just execute." She nodded. They circled. Sierra lunged, and Delaney fell hard. Not clumsy, not tripped, flipped, clean, controlled. Delaney got up, blinking. Hart frowned. He ordered them to repeat the drill. This time Sierra deliberately used the wrong technique, letting Delaney overpower her. Leah saw it. So did Ramirez, watching quietly again from the edge of the mat. That's when it hit Leah. She's not here to pass. She's here to see who's watching. That night, Leah checked Sierra's locker. No personal effects, no letters, no photos. But taped to the inside of the door was a torn strip of cloth, faded, dirty, folded neatly. A number was stitched in red thread. The number 17, nothing else. But it felt like a name no one dared speak aloud. Sergeant Hart doubled down the next day. You think you're special, Vale? Think just because you made some paper hole you're qualified? Sierra didn't speak. He moved closer. You think I don't see through the act? She met his eyes. Once. Cold. Calm. You don't see anything, Sergeant. It wasn't a challenge. It was a statement. Hart stared at her, then walked away. Leah wrote in her journal that night, she's not part of this system. That's why it keeps trying to break her. And it can't. Because Sierra Vale doesn't come from this chain of command. She comes from something older. There's a difference between testing someone and trying to destroy them. Everyone at Camp Southgate knew what the reality check drill really was. Officially, it was framed as a resilience exercise, a way to measure a recruit's composure under pressure. But unofficially, it was an execution. A brutal tradition designed to publicly break those who didn't belong. And on day 15, the chosen target was Sierra Vale. The announcement came without warning, right after lights out. Major Avery Harrow himself made the call, stepping into the barracks as if he'd been waiting weeks for this moment. Tomorrow, he said, his voice like dry gravel, we separate the performers from the pretenders. Then he turned directly toward Vale's bunk. Miss Vale, you've struggled with basic competencies since day one, but maybe your civilian background's got some use left in it. 30 seconds. 5 of our best. No weapons, no resets. If you're still on your feet at the end, we'll call it divine intervention. The silence afterward wasn't just heavy, it was suffocating. Even the cockiest recruits didn't laugh, because everyone knew what this was. A show, a sanctioned humiliation. The next morning, the training field transformed. Spectators gathered in quiet anticipation. Medics stood ready on the edge of the line. Trauma kits prepped. Command staff lingered by the perimeter, arms folded, unreadable. Even the most hardened soldiers felt it. This wasn't a drill. It was a spectacle. Sierra Vale stepped out of the equipment bay at precisely 600. She wore the same neutral gray shirt. No insignia, no padding, but her sleeves were rolled up this time. And for the first time, everyone saw the scars. Old ones, healed, faded into skin but not forgotten by memory. Bullet grooves, surgical stitching, torn muscle made whole again. They weren't the kind of scars you got from falling off a training wall. These were from survival, and they were testimony. Commander Eliza Monroe stared in silence. She'd spent half the night rereading Vale's intake file. Over and over, that phrase, Echo Black, archived, kept repeating in her mind like a ghost whispering from behind sealed doors. And now, seeing those scars under daylight, Monroe exhaled slowly. She's not a trainee, she whispered to no one. She's a ghost, and we just called her back. The 5 chosen for the drill arrived with the swagger of wolves. Shinoda, speed and brute instinct. Nas Clem, close-quarter specialist known for joint dislocation drills. Bram, a monster in grapples, center of mass like a tank. Merrick, quiet but ruthless in motion. Novak, the tactician, the finisher. All 5 had trained together for years. All 5 had ended careers in less than 30 seconds. They circled like a practice machine. But Sierra Vale? She simply stood, hands relaxed at her sides. Then Major Harrow stepped forward, whistle in hand. No weapons, no eye gouging, no surrender unless you say it loud. Any last words, Miss Vale? She turned to face him fully. The desert wind pushed against her hair, but her voice was calm, almost quiet. Just one. She looked at Sergeant Hart, looked through him. When this is over, will you finally admit you never understood what I was? No one spoke. Even Novak blinked. Then the whistle blew. The desert exploded. Shinoda came in first. Straight line charge, shoulder braced like a battering ram. But Sierra was already gone. She moved 8 inches to the left, timing the shift so precisely it looked like physics had betrayed her attacker. Her hand flicked upward, 2 fingers to the base of Shinoda's neck. He collapsed mid-stride, eyes wide, mouth frozen. 4 left. Clem and Bram tried to flank her. Tight angles, speed, force. But Sierra vanished again, ducking beneath Bram's overextension, slipping under Clem's reach like smoke. They collided. Knees met knees, shoulder met chin. Both fell. Before they could rise, she was already there. Chukun, 1 palm to Clem's temple. Sukun, 1 stomp to Bram's shin, locking the joint. 2 more down. Novak stepped forward, tense. He hadn't moved yet. He didn't want to join the wreckage. He wanted to read her, find the pattern. Sierra didn't give him one. She simply breathed and waited. Merrick tried a low sweep, reaching for her ankle. It was smart. Fast, low risk. But there were no ankles where they should have been. Sierra leapt, pivoted midair, elbow crashing down behind Merrick's neck with deadly calm. He crumpled like a stringless puppet. Only Novak remained, and now his hands trembled. He wasn't looking at a trainee anymore. He was looking at something trained to erase things, quietly, efficiently. She didn't walk like a warrior. She moved like a memory. Novak backed away. "I yield," he whispered. The whistle never sounded, because it didn't need to. Sierra turned, not to gloat, not to smirk, but to check on the others. One by one, she knelt beside each fallen man, checked pulse, checked breath, adjusted posture to avoid spinal pressure. Her hands weren't violent now. They were clinical. Like this wasn't a fight, it was a lesson. And it was over. The silence that followed was heavier than the impact of any strike. Then, one sound, clapping, soft, hesitant. Private Leah Morgan, standing near the rear. She clapped slowly, reverently. Others followed. And then the whole field stood, not in celebration, but in recognition. They had witnessed something rare. Not just victory, but truth. 5 men, elite, tested, feared, the kind of soldiers legends are made from. And now they stood in a semicircle around a woman who hadn't raised her voice once since arriving at Southgate. No one blinked, no one moved. The air was thick with sand and held breath. Sierra Vale stood in the center, sleeves rolled, arms loose at her sides, breathing deep, controlled. The sun beat down on the cracked tarmac. Sweat clung to foreheads. But Sierra, dry, unshaken. There was no tension in her body, only focus, like a machine calculating multiple trajectories in real time. Zero no production, whistle blow. Shinoda lunged first, predictable. The fastest always goes first, hoping speed will compensate for chaos. But Sierra didn't retreat. She sidestepped. Precise, 8 inches, the exact space needed to let his momentum carry him past. As he passed, she placed one hand on the back of his neck. Nothing dramatic, just a touch. A tap, really. But the angle, the pressure point, the momentum, it all converged. Shinoda collapsed face first, sliding in the dust. He didn't move again. 009. Clem and Bram moved simultaneously, flanking tactics. Good strategy, if your opponent doesn't already know the pattern. Sierra dipped low. Bram overcommitted to his right swing, colliding shoulder first into Clem's chest. The two stumbled, off rhythm. Sierra spun beneath them, sweeping Clem's knee out with her heel while locking Bram's elbow mid-fall. 2 cracks, 1 impact, 3 down, 11 seconds. Now only Merrick and Novak remained. Merrick charged, tactical and low, trying to grab her legs. But Sierra was already moving, her center of gravity rising mid-pivot, like she'd anticipated the move 3 steps ago. She brought her elbow down, short and brutal, to the base of Merrick's skull. He dropped instantly. Sierra paused, half a breath, then turned. Only Novak was left. 024, eye contact. Novak had trained for 14 years. He'd run simulations in 3 continents. He could read an enemy's body language in under a second. But Sierra? He couldn't read her at all. There was no aggression in her stance. No anticipation of pain. Just stillness. But the kind of stillness that screamed, "I've been here before. You haven't." Novak lowered his hand slowly. "I yield," he said. barely louder than a whisper. 029. Silence. Sierra didn't move. She simply exhaled, lowered her gaze, and walked to each of the fallen. First Shinoda, then Clem, Bram, Merrick. One by one, she knelt, checked pulse, adjusted limbs, loosened gear, cleared airways. Every motion clinical, measured, gentle. She wasn't gloating. She was ensuring they'd walk again. Novak watched her work like a medic, like a ghost built for war, but wired for mercy. Across the training field, not a sound could be heard. Even Hart had fallen quiet, his mouth slightly open, the insult he'd prepared now dead in his throat. Monroe stood back, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, but not in confusion, in confirmation. The puzzle had solved itself. That tattoo under Sierra's sleeve, the faint 6 lines etched in skin, with one carefully crossed out, that was the only identification the Ghost Division ever left behind. Unofficial, unacknowledged, but unforgettable to those who knew. Then it happened. One clap, soft, sharp. It came from the left edge of the crowd, Private Leah Morgan. She had never been one to speak first. She'd always waited, watched, calculated. But now, she understood. And the only thing left to say wasn't words. It was recognition. Another clap followed, then another, then 2 more, until the entire field, dozens of soldiers, officers, trainers, were standing, hands coming together in imperfect rhythm. It wasn't applause. It was reverence. They weren't cheering for victory. They were acknowledging truth. Sierra stood slowly, hands brushing dust from her knees. She didn't nod. She didn't smile. She simply walked. Past Novak, past the stunned instructors, past Sergeant Hart, who still hadn't moved, past Monroe, who gave her a single subtle nod. She picked up her towel, slung her bag, walked off the field the same way she'd walked onto it, unhurried, silent. But this time, everyone cleared the path. Leah Morgan remained behind, notebook tucked in her cargo pocket. Her eyes stayed on Sierra's retreating figure until the shadow disappeared behind the barracks. She wrote later that night, "We mocked her discipline. We called her forgettable. We tested her like she hadn't already passed things we can't even imagine. And the whole time she wasn't hiding weakness. She was hiding strength because she knew we wouldn't know what to do with it." Sierra Vale never spoke about that day, not to anyone. But in the years that followed, the footage was requested 37 times and denied each time under classification protocol. To this day, those 83 seconds remain a ghost story in the ranks. Not for what she did, but for what she proved. Greatness doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just waits for the world to finally stop underestimating it. The next morning, her bunk was empty. No bag, no boots, no trace of Sierra Vale. Only a single folded towel placed neatly at the foot of the bed, creased at military corners. And beneath it, tucked with precision, a black envelope sealed with a red wax stamp bearing no insignia. No one claimed it. No one opened it. But somehow, everyone knew it wasn't meant to be touched. In the command center, Commander Eliza Monroe sat before a frozen frame of surveillance footage. Sierra Vale standing alone in the middle of the training field. 5 soldiers collapsed around her, the moment just after Novak whispered, "I yield." The image didn't show movement, but it radiated force. She zoomed in slowly on Sierra's left forearm. There it was, the tattoo. 6 vertical lines, one cleanly crossed out. Not a design, not art, a mark. She had heard whispers of it. So had Hart. So had Ramirez, though he'd never admitted aloud. They called it the Ghost Division. A rumor passed in hallways after midnight. A story buried behind secured folders, impossible clearance levels, and missions that didn't appear in any report. A unit without base, without rank, without survivors. Because no one was supposed to come back. That was the point. The tattoo wasn't just a signature, it was a eulogy. And Sierra Vale had walked into Southgate wearing it like a warning nobody had read. Sergeant Lucas Hart hadn't spoken since the fight. Not in the mess hall, not during inspection, not even when the brass asked for an explanation. He sat alone in the shade near the weapons yard, staring at nothing, fingers slowly tightening and loosening into a fist. again and again. People tried to ask him what had happened. He gave the same answer every time. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Private Leah Morgan kept writing. She didn't know why. Maybe to remember. Maybe to understand. Maybe because silence like Sierra's needed to be balanced by someone telling the truth. Her final journal entry read, "We didn't lose to her strength. We lost to our blindness. She wasn't trying to be better than us. She just was. Because she came from a world where survival wasn't an idea. It was a job." She paused, then underlined her final thought 3 times. Ghosts don't ask permission. Subharinum. 3 days later, an internal memo circulated quietly among command channels. Subject: personnel reassignment. Name redacted, new role, advanced combat instructor, site Omega 4, effective immediately. Access level, Echo Prime. This record is sealed under Protocol 7B. Forwarding or duplication constitutes breach of national operational integrity. Only Monroe saw the full document, and when she read the name, she exhaled slowly. It wasn't Sierra Vale. In fact, it wasn't a name at all, just a 4-letter call sign that didn't appear in any personnel database. And at the bottom of the page, handwritten in red ink, 1 of 6 confirmed alive. Back at Camp Southgate, stories spread fast. No one said her name. No one tried to explain what they saw. Because how do you explain a ghost that bled, that checked pulses after dropping elite men like shadows? That left without a word, but stayed in everyone's memory like thunder after lightning? They didn't talk about her like a recruit anymore. They talked about her like a warning. Instructors became sharper after she left, stricter, but quieter. There were fewer jokes, fewer assumptions. The tone of the camp changed. It wasn't fear, it was respect. Because now even the loudest among them had learned, sometimes the smallest person in the room isn't weak. Sometimes she's just done proving it. Late one evening, Leah Morgan stood near the range wall, looking out toward the dunes. The wind was picking up, carrying heat and grit through the air. Someone stood beside her. Ramirez. He didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, "You think she'll come back?" Leah thought for a moment, then shook her head. "I think she was never meant to stay. She came here to remind us we still have blind spots, that some ghosts don't haunt, they train." Somewhere far from Camp Southgate, in a facility buried beneath layers of clearance codes and stone, a woman stood before a new group of recruits. Tactical gear, black clipboard, calm eyes, her hair pulled back, her face unreadable. No name badge, no rank, just presence. She raised her voice just enough to be heard. "Your assumptions will get you killed. Your routines will betray you. Your fear isn't the enemy. Your overconfidence is." The room fell silent, and Sierra Vale, if that was even her name, began again. Not as a myth, not as a ghost, but as the most dangerous kind of teacher. The kind who doesn't care if you like her. She only cares if you survive. Power doesn't need permission, and the most dangerous person in the room is usually the one who never needed to prove it. In the end, Sierra Vale didn't stay to explain herself. She never gave a speech, never claimed a title, never demanded recognition. And maybe that's the part we need to remember. Because in today's world, so loud, so rushed, so obsessed with status and visibility, we often forget that real power doesn't have to announce itself. Sometimes it walks quietly through the door, gets the job done, and leaves you questioning everything you thought you knew. Sierra's story isn't just about military grit. It's about the people in our lives we overlook. The woman in the corner office who doesn't brag, but built the company's backbone. The older man at the diner who still carries himself like a soldier, though no one asks where he served. The nurse who works a double shift without ever raising her voice. It's about you. If you've ever been underestimated, ignored, or told you didn't belong, this story is a reminder. Your value doesn't disappear just because others don't see it. Your quiet strength, your scars, your past, they matter, even if the world isn't ready to admit it. Now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever met someone like Sierra Vale? Someone whose past wasn't visible, but whose presence changed the room? Or maybe you are that person. Do you believe we live in a society that still overlooks silent strength? Or has the tide begun to turn? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please scroll down and leave a comment, especially if this story made you reflect on your own life or someone you know. And if you're one of our older viewers, let me say this directly. Thank you. You are the living memory of lessons we cannot afford to forget. Your stories, your wisdom, your quiet resilience, those are the things this world still needs, even if it doesn't always say it. If this story moved you, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with someone who might need a reminder that not all strength shouts. Sometimes it just waits, in silence, in patience, in readiness. Thank you for spending your time with me today. And remember, the most dangerous person in the room is usually the one who never needed to prove it. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, stay sharp, stay kind, and don't forget to notice the quiet ones.